Welcome to this screencast on Ruby Meta Classes Part 2. I'll explain about the meta classes and how it's actually um, works in Ruby. So let's get started. I want to briefly go over the previous episode where I had this foo.ancestors and it showed you this, but I was not really trying to find the ancestors. But for foo, ancestor actually returns a list of modules included. And I had covered this thing in a previous screencast, but in this case what we want to actually do is find the class of that particular foo class we have defined, and it is of type class. And let's contrast this with, if you instantiate foo, you get a foo object, and if you find the class of that foo object, then you get foo. So that's where the distinction is, and how the object classes and all those things relates to class you define. And just to show you how the modules actually works, if you say module, let's say my module, so include, let's say math library, include comparable. You can call my modulate dot ancestors. Actually, I had gone over this thing when I discussed about method lookup. So now in this case, it first looks at my modulate and then comparable and then math. The last one included wins. And if you look up ancestors for math, there is none. Okay, that's how the ancestors things works. It goes up the chain of things that are looked up to find a method when you call a certain method. Now let's go back to the meta classes thing. I'll copy over the previous class player that we were having and we were playing with, and illustrate some features of meta classes. Let's create an object of player new name and the number of points. Objects cannot hold methods. Previously I had mentioned this. Most objects don't need to hold any methods, but sometimes you may want an object to have some methods, depending on the problem that you're having. So let's see how the meta classes allows us to give specific objects the ability to respond to certain messages. Those methods are only applicable to those objects. For instance, in the YAML library, you can customize the properties shown when an object is output. So let's say require and then you can say class. This is the syntax for adding a method to a specific object. I want to add it to object P. This is the method I'm adding to YAML properties, and what I want to output in the YAML output is the name and the points. So if you print this, dump, you have to parenthesize, otherwise it complains. Parenthesize for feature version. So I can print the player object, and you see this output customized for that particular object. So this is useful if you want to dump one specific object with a specific styling of YAML without affecting every object from that class. So only the object P in this case will be output with these properties and this order, name and points. All other player objects will output in the default way the YAML library um, outputs the properties. So this is applicable only for a certain object, and if you just open up the player object and included this, it will be available for all objects, which may not be the right, which may not be what you want. So in this case, the P has its own special toYAML properties method, and this is stored in a meta class. The meta class stores methods for the object and sits in the inheritance chain. But you cannot really access this meta class through any of the Ruby's methods. It's kind of like it won't show up. It's kind of hidden, but it's kind of sitting in the inheritance chain, and it responds when someone makes a call, and you can find those methods. And there is another alternative syntax. Instead of using this syntax, we can also extend that particular object with a specific method using this properties, and then you can provide how you want to output. This also would work. This is alternative syntax. Oops, it's points. In this case, we have points. So Vichy and points is 3000. And we'll continue more along these lines in later screencasts. And that's all. That's all I have for this time. If you enjoyed it, please recommend me on Working with Rails. Thank you. God bless.